To the musicians of Beaufort Symphony, welcome back. To their audience, welcome back. And we hope this is to be expanded. We didn't have our winds and brass today because they have trouble playing in masks. We wanted to make sure that we weren't an endangerment to people while we enhance life. We don't want to end it. So we have string repertoire for you. But for those of you maybe who haven't heard my string chauvinist discussion, a string orchestra is an orchestra. And then what we do is we add wind, brass, and percussion soloists. Sometimes at schools they go, oh, can we have the band play with you? Like, no, you cannot have the band play with us. We don't need 9 clarinets. 2 of your best. That's all we want. So you are indeed getting an orchestra concert today, and we're going to continue with a little more. I couldn't have in good conscience brought all these fine musicians back together today and only let them play pops. That would just have been in bad taste. I know some of you maybe would just assume we play just pops. Maybe some of you would just assume we just play Mozart. But it was very important to play a little Mozart as a welcome back. So here's some Mozart. Rossini wrote that overture when he was about 24. Mozart did him a lot better. He wrote this Divertimento when he was 16. I love to make high school kids try and play it and then go, he was your age. So here is Mozart Divertimento K136, the D major. Mozart is always the great revealer. If you can play Mozart, you can play anything. If you can't play Mozart, you better go elsewhere. Because it's pristine. When you go to rehearse it, if anybody does the slightest tiny little thing, the orchestra turns and glares at them. So it has to be immaculate. And boy, these guys really came to play. I'm very proud of them. One thing good about COVID for musicians is that you're home and you got your instrument. So I bet you most of these people have been practicing for a year. I know I've been practicing my violin, and actually you see those videos that came out of a place like Italy, and these people would stand on their balcony and sing to the neighborhood, and then they'd pass it on, somebody else would sing to the neighborhood, and I just feel sorry for you guys who can't play. Well, I mean, I'm kidding, but I'm not completely kidding, because there was a day when there were no CDs, there were no iPads or iPods, there was no streaming music, and the reason people learned how to play was so they could be entertained at home. And so that's what we did all COVID, is we entertained ourselves at home. Here's a piece by Soon Hee Newbold called Warrior Legacy. A lot of young women took to teaching in schools and teaching string programs, because that was the jobs that were offered. And they were sometimes disappointed with the repertoire that only had like interesting first violin parts, and everybody else was subservient. And so they started writing better music for ensemble, so that the second violins, violas, basses, and cellos got some interesting stuff going on. Soon Hee was probably the best of the lot. And she started writing for her little tiny kids. Her stuff for fourth graders is unbelievable. We'll do something a little more complicated than that. And as her groups got more advanced, the music she wrote for them got more advanced, until finally, we just celebrated International Women's Day. We're very proud to offer the music of Soon Hee Newbold, not just as a quote-unquote educational composer, but as really a seriously good composer. Beautiful melodies, beautiful voice leading, beautiful ideas. Here's Warrior Legacy by Soon Hee Newbold. I just think her music is tremendously exciting, and everything she writes is just terrific. She's signed a few contracts lately, I think, doing music for some kung fu movies. She is also an expert in kung fu, so it's a pretty cool combination. Next, this was Greta Maddox's special request. So this is Ashokan Farewell. It was from the Civil War miniseries, and it depicts the young man of a small town leaving to go off to war. And there's this sense of pride and possession, but there's also a sense of sadness that we don't know who's coming back. So there's this angst to it. So here's Ashokan Farewell. I know you guys are familiar with this next number. Written originally as a hit in Italy before Elvis ever made it. But then when he did it, it's kind of, one of the things about Elvis is that he put his mark on it, and then it became unmistakable. And people refer to it almost like, oh yeah, that song by Elvis. Spectacular performer, though, influenced my interpretation of it. So here's Can't Help Falling in Love. speaking of young composers, John Lennon and Paul McCartney started writing music when they were teenagers, and the Beatles made it to America. I think George was still 19. So amazingly young. I mean, these days we call them like child prodigies practically, except that no, they were professionals. They got sent to Hamburg for 2 years, and they played 4 shows a night, 5 nights a week. And by the time they got back to Liverpool, they were professional. They had several things going for them, really big time. They were, first of all, a heck of a good rock band. They were just good. They were tight. They had 2- and 3-part harmonies that were inventive and lovely and beautiful, and they sang in tune. They had original material. How many of you have ever heard a cover band? They were not a cover band after they were like 20 years old. They were doing all originals, amazing stuff. And so, then later in their careers, a lot of their music was accompanied by string instruments like Eleanor Rigby. If you go back and listen to it, there's nothing but strings and vocals. There's no drums, there's no piano, it's just string. And so a lot of their music lends itself rather well to orchestral arrangement. And then it also lends itself well because they give us the 3-part harmony. So here's some of their really fun music. You can't do Best of the Beatles. We'd be here all night. So we're just going to do 3 numbers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're very glad you're here and that we got permission to get a few dozen of you into the room. I did this with a school orchestra, and I really had to plead with the 5th and 6th graders, don't feel badly that you didn't have hundreds of people standing and cheering. You played just beautifully, and don't let the vacuum of absent audience influence the way you felt about the way you played, because they would finish a piece, they'd look at me, up at me bright-eyed, they'd stand and look around, and you really had to explain. These guys, they know they're good. You know, the history of Motown is actually fairly profound. It was an integrated band, an integrated process, very American, and if a black person made a hit, they got to keep the hit. That's not always true in our history. You probably realize that Elvis didn't write everything he performed. And you maybe never even heard of some of the performers who didn't get a hit out of it, but they wrote the great music. So in this case, the performers got the hit. If it was the Supremes or Temptations or Smokey Robinson, they got to perform it and they got the glory. When I was about 12, 13, 14 years old, I had a cousin that used to come visit from Chicago all the time. She always wanted me to go with her. She was in her 40s. She was my father's oldest sibling's oldest child. I'm my father's, he's the youngest, and I'm the youngest of his. So she was like, 30 years older than me. And she made a deal with me that if I would go with her to hear Richie Havens, the one who beat the tar out of the guitar and sang protest songs, if I would go with her to that, then I could pick whatever concert in New York City I wanted to go to the next night. So I made her bring me to the Apollo Theater. I think I got the better end of that deal. We were the only white people in the audience, and people were dancing in the aisles, and I fell in love with the Supremes and Temptations and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. I never got to see the Four Tops there. I saw them later, but it wasn't the same. There's something about going to the Apollo when, oh my gosh. So I try to give you a little bit of that flavor here with Motown. You may or may not have heard our orchestra play the full orchestra rendition of this next number, Pirates of the Caribbean. It started off as a ride at Disney. I kid you not, it was just a ride. And then they made a movie out of it with Johnny Depp and Orlando Bloom. Yeah, and those guys stole the show and made it an icon. But the first movie had really, really good music. In fact, it was so good they took it away from the composer and gave it to somebody else. Somebody more famous, because who's heard of Klaus Badelt? I mean, it's not like falls trippingly off the lips, right? Klaus Badelt, but he's the one that wrote the first score to Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's actually the genius behind the music, I think. So to give him full credit for that. So here's music from Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie of it, and we're doing it. The arranger is the same one who did the arrangement for full orchestra, Ted Ricketts. I call him Red Tickets. And just spectacular arrangement. And for strings, it's also spectacular arrangement, you'll see. So Lady Gaga actually doesn't need much of an introduction. Everybody knows all about her. Spectacular musician. I think she was a piano major at Juilliard, and nobody even knew she could sing back then. And wrote some of her biggest hits for other artists, and then decided to start performing them herself. So really a class act. I think just tremendous singer, tremendous performer, and really, really good composer. Brilliant young lady, just brilliant. So also in honor of International Women's Day, another female composer. And I think there's starting to be some encouragement, commercially as well as artistically. So it's good. Speaking of pieces of music that lend themselves well to symphonic arrangement, Bohemian Rhapsody, if you watch the video of it, I mean, it's strictly rock band fare. But oh my goodness, it lends itself well to string playing. In fact, if I watch the video and I hear, a guitar, I go, I think I maybe like it better on cello. That's pretty cool. So, and some of you have heard those two cellists. Have you heard those guys on YouTube? The two Serbian cellists, they play rock and roll. So it changed its perspective completely as to what strings can actually do. So here's some more rock and roll music. Is that our last number? We've got a little encore number for you afterward, but you have been wonderful, audience. Hello to all of you in cyberspace. We're very pleased to present this. We'll probably do more because it's lots of fun. They say the mind can only absorb what the rear can endure. Can you take one more? Okay, good. This one needs no introduction.